What is the Monarch Mind Programming? It's the CIA's project to create childhood trauma in our society. A project that began after the Second World War together with MK Ultra. The Monarch Mind Control Project creates slaves undetectably. You're exposed to subliminal messaging from the day you're born, conditioned to hate yourself. But you're also conditioned to believe in a false reality. Imagine you began erasing the truth from most educational sources, or you began tweaking it, inserting lies here and there just to see what happens. One day, the truth is enmeshed with the lies, and those in power who have the money can begin to market the lies. If lies are all that you see around you, you begin to believe in them. The Third World War has already begun. It's spiritual warfare. It's mind control. I'm not talking about scientists going into your brain and doing experiments. I'm talking about scientists distorting the truth to keep you sick, ill-informed, programmed to be a slave to the system. The purpose of this video is to make you question things. Everything that we have been fed as information since the Second World War or the 60s, when TV programming made its way to every household, should be questioned. It's time to start thinking for yourself. Here are 5 sectors or industries that shape the Monarch Mind Control Programming. Hi, I'm Stella, writer and lightworker, here to inspire positive change. The first sector is healthcare or the medicine industry. If you want to start a business today, all you need to do is think of a problem that you can solve. But if there's no problem, you create the problem. Medicine has been doing just that. They have been creating problems on purpose to keep making profit, to keep saving the day as the heroes who have the cure. You can easily see how this can translate into creating global viruses. But you don't need to look that far. Just look at the side effects to every single prescribed drug. We are like abused animals that would take anything to stop the pain, even if the cure brings us more pain. And who's abusing us? The system. Barbara O'Neill gives a great example as to how medicine has been turned into a money-making business.
How many people are in aged care with dementia and Alzheimer's and memory loss, and it's the cholesterol-lowering medication? I believe personally this verges on criminal, especially when you hear what I'm about to say. It was probably 5 years ago now at Living Springs Retreat. We had a scientist do our program with his wife, who was a nutritionist. They're both in their late 60s. She's 69. She said, I've been a nutritionist for 40 years. So she said, I was educated in university 40 years ago. And she said, 40 years ago, we were told that a cholesterol level of 300 and under was perfectly normal. Has the body changed? No. So can you see what medicine has done? They've dropped the levels. They now say that if you are over 190, you're a walking, talking heart attack. I have had people say that to me. One girl was 30, her cholesterol levels were 192, and the doctor said, you've got to go on cholesterol-lowering medication. 30. We had a pharmacist do our program. She said, this really annoys me. She said, I know it's only a money-making scheme, because if you go on an antibiotic, you're on it for a week. If you go on cholesterol-lowering medication, how long are you told you're on it for? Life.
The second sector is education. If you don't know how your own body and mind work, you're always dependent on others when something's not quite right, whether it concerns your physical health or your mental health. Education plays a huge role in creating codependency in society. Yes, we are social creatures, but we have been disabled, socially speaking, so that we are never truly whole on our own, or at least we're made to believe in that. So what are schools teaching us? Well, the government want us to know who was in power when and who was right and who was wrong. Yes, there's biology, chemistry, physics, literature, even philosophy. But are they really taught in a way that explains how life works, or how these subjects connect to help us accomplish our sole purpose? No, not really. And spirituality is laughed at. Let's not forget there's no emotional intelligence, soft skills, or money education covered in the curriculum before you enter the real world. If you do not know something, you're more likely to be scared of it. Fear. If the education system could teach you fear, the governments would be all over it. Because fear sells. Fear-based programming drives sales. Are we living in a version of 1984? There are definitely some political leaders that would like that to happen. Destroying our freedom of speech, our freedom of thought, would make executing their plans, their evil plans, so much easier. Now is the time to think for yourself. But first, watch this clip.
Totalitarianism is a political system whereby a centralized state apparatus attempts to control virtually all aspects of life. Everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state, the Italian dictator Mussolini succinctly put it. While totalitarianism can emerge under the guise of various political ideologies, in the 20th century it was communism and fascism that provided the ideological support for this type of rule. Communism and fascism are often viewed as being on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but in the manner they were put into practice in the 20th century, both of these systems displayed the characteristics of the totalized, all-controlling state. Both used force and propaganda to attain power, crush economic and civil liberties, smother culture, partake in mass surveillance, and terrorize the citizenry with psychological warfare and eventually mass imprisonment and mass murder. Speaking of Stalin's communist Russia and Hitler's Nazi Germany, Orwell explained, "The two regimes, having started from opposite ends, are rapidly evolving towards the same system, a form of oligarchical collectivism. In the communist and fascist political systems of the 20th century and in 1984, the totalitarian regime maintained a tight grip of control on the populace through the use of manufactured fear. Totalitarian leaders, whether of the right or of the left, know better than anyone else how to make use of fear. They thrive on chaos and bewilderment. The strategy of fear is one of their most valuable tactics."
The third sector is the food industry. Governments around the world want to create a global society that looks like WALL-E, brainwashed, consumed by distractions, immobilized. What you eat is your fuel for the day and your fuel for life. When you eat unhealthy for years, sometimes you create chronic conditions that are beyond repair. The body can heal itself, but not while you're feeding it with poison. And this is where spiritual warfare becomes more than just mind games. This is where the effects of the propaganda, of changing facts and spreading lies, and using marketing to glamorize a lifestyle based on illusions, creates disempowerment in society. If you disempower the soldiers become slaves. What are the top 3 food options for today's slaves? Sugar, alcohol, drugs. They are addictive and they create addictions within the body, mind, and spirit. They spoil you. They spoil the warrior within you. You've been disempowered by the system. It's time to wake up and reclaim your power, because some of the scariest diseases we're facing today are foodborne, created by our diet.
Cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, obesity, autoimmune conditions, these are all going up and they are all foodborne illnesses. And the fact that there is not clear communication about that from our medical leaders and public policy leaders, I think is the biggest scandal in America and the most dangerous scandal. We are being brought to our knees by metabolic dysfunction tied to food. 8 of the 10 killers of Americans, as I mentioned, some of them are directly tied to food. That also includes depression. Depression is skyrocketing, and as Chris Palmer at Harvard and some other prominent doctors are pointing out, brain conditions are metabolic dysfunctions. I frame it that way to kind of set the table that what's happening right now in America, where 30% of children have prediabetes, where 80% of adults are obese or overweight, where 50% of adults have fatty liver disease and 20% of teens have fatty liver disease. You only saw this condition in elderly alcoholics just a generation ago. We're destroying our human capital and obviously our budget from something we're being told is complicated, but it's very simple.
The fourth sector is the foster care system. If you've watched this video, you already know what the system is trying to do. Create a version of the future where children are not the future. How can you disempower people? 1. Make them believe their dreams are worthless. 2. Poison them every step of the way with medicine, food, and false information. 3. Attack the most vulnerable members of our society, kids and teenagers. And there are already certain countries where children could be taken away from their parents if the government thinks there's something wrong within the family, even if there's nothing wrong with the family. Because the government's not benefiting from healthy, happy children who believe in their dreams and are supported by their environment. This is where childhood trauma plays into the structure of today's society. Trauma gives birth to high performers who can be plugged into the capitalist matrix and turned into slaves that will not question the rules. This is why we live in a society made up of abuse, narcissism, victimhood, manipulation, gaslighting, and so on. All of them are unnatural, but all of them make money. Spiritual warfare means that we've been made to turn against each other in the name of money, glory, fame, power, all the while we're pawns in the master game of the elites. A game that has one goal for them. And it's not control or power. It's not even money, because none of us lives forever. It's destruction. Their goal is to destroy Earth in any way possible. And the best way to do that is to attack the children while keeping us distracted.
As a caseworker, I had these quotas, and we were told that if we didn't bring kids in, then we would be fired. And the way that the funding is set up is that they have to reach a quota.
Is there anything stopping them from grabbing anyone's child to meet that quota?
No, because there's really not any oversight. It's basically the caseworker that determines that need. And you're encouraged to do this because you're going to get more money for more behaviors. So your base child, you're not going to get as much for. But a child that is defiant, a runner, self-harms, you're going to get more for. The way that works is they give the foster parent $65 a day. But if you have a foster parent that knows the system, she would say, that child's behavior is too much. I'm not dealing with that child. You're going to have to give me $75 a day or $100 a day. And you're literally negotiating these rates. So they were diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, and then they're placed on psychotropic medication. What this psychotropic medication does is it actually causes them to be more aggressive and more suicidal.
The final sector is police. The people you're supposed to be able to turn to for help are not available because they're part of the system, or they have been trained by the system to support the system, and not the general population that relies on them for protection. A little bit like the human resources team in a company. They are there to support the company, the employers that will give them the paycheck. One example of how the police does more damage than good is when victims are exposed to dark psychology tricks to keep them confused and eventually make them realize that it was their fault. This strategy is known as gaslighting. When did gaslighting begin? Around the time of the Second World War. You have to be able to understand how dark psychology works if you want to win a war or survive today's society of abusers and manipulators. The Netflix series Unbelievable shows how gaslighting works in institutions.
Increasingly, stories today look at how institutions gaslight vulnerable members of our society. In Netflix's Unbelievable, gaslighting is seen as a symptom of rape culture. Caitlin Deaver's Marie Adler is a victim of rape who is repeatedly gaslit by the police, to the point where she begins to doubt whether it ever happened to her in the first place.
And if your answer turns out to be a lie, I have no choice but to arrest you.
Unbelievable illustrates how easy it can be to successfully gaslight someone if you are in a position of power over them.
Nope. Totally made up. Says she didn't think it would turn into such a big thing.
It is only when Marie gains new allies with power, detectives Grace Rasmussen and Karen Duvall, that she is able to reconstruct her memory and challenge her gaslighters.
And this is how you create slaves to the system. Healthcare drugs you to the point where there's always something wrong with you. Because who has the time to read the list of all the side effects? You gotta keep making money for the economy. Education doesn't really educate you because the truth's infused with lies. and you've not really been taught or encouraged to think for yourself. You might have even been punished if you expressed your ideas openly. The food industry feeds you substances that create infections in your body and confusion in your mind, so that you cannot see or care too much about what's really going on around you. Foster care is the perfect place to experiment with kids, including psychological and drug tests before they push them into society if the clinical tests have proven successful. You see, they've replaced mice with kids. And since there's no one to protect the kids, the trauma-making system continues as planned. Finally, police does exactly what it's supposed to: protect the image of those with money. Money and fame are the two symbols of success in today's world. What people wouldn't do for money and fame without ever thinking about the consequences of their actions. And every action has a consequence, but hey, who's watching? Well, the system is watching, like all the time, but they're not the only ones. There are higher powers watching the system too. The bottom line is, Monarch Mind Control Programming blocks our evolution, starting with attacking the children, those that hold the keys for the future. Before we can restructure society, we must understand the faults and the flaws of the current system, so that we can rebuild it in a way that we can finally bring positive change, keep the children safe at all times, and ideally remove all the parasites from the design.